Hey guys, Brian from Boas here. I've been getting a lot of questions from you guys lately about how I price my baby boas. So that's the topic for today's video. There are several different ways that boa sellers use to price boas, and I'm going to discuss them, including how I go about it. So if you're planning on selling any boas in the near future, be sure to stay tuned. Also, if you're planning on buying any boas, stay tuned as well so you can understand the strategies and hopefully get a better deal on your next boa purchase. I'm no economist, but when it comes down to the basic factors that set the price of a boa, they're really no different from what determines the price of a barrel of oil, a bar of gold, or any other commodity. And that comes down to supply and demand. So if we have a very low supply and a very high demand, the price of something is going to go up. Conversely, if we have a very low demand and a very high supply, the price of something is going to go down. And so when we look at the boa market as a whole, the demand for boas has increased a lot in the last 5 or 10 years. There's been a surge in popularity in boa keeping, and this is especially prevalent in the last few years since the pandemic hit, and people have more time at home. They have less money they have less opportunity to travel and to spend their money on things that they would have done in the past. They're looking for something to do at home, and boa keeping is a great hobby for them. And also a lot more people have gotten into it, but the supply of boas hasn't increased. Breeding reptiles takes a lot of planning, and it's really a long-term type of a project. You don't just do it in a year. Typically it takes you multiple years. With breeding boas, it was typically a 5-year project from acquiring the babies to producing the first litter. It can be even more in some cases. So you can't, unfortunately, just wave a magic wand and create a lot of boas to bring to the market. So there's been this low supply of boas, more and more people wanting to get into them, and so of course the price is going to go up. There's other things, of course. This is kind of a simplification. The desirability and popularity of an item derives the price. The amount of overhead that it costs to create an item also will drive the price. So of course the popularity of boas has gone up, which drives the demand. Demand goes up even higher because of this. And the cost of producing boas has also gone up, due to the rise in prices of pretty much everything. So people have to pay more now to maintain their collections and produce boas. So of course the supply is going to go down because of that. So all of the factors are in place for boas to go up in price, and to, I believe to continue going up in price. I wish lots of people could just breed them and we'd have plenty of boas. So hopefully more of these boas that people want, especially some of these rarer locality boas, will be more prevalent on the market in the next, 5 years or so. But we'll just have to see. So when you see prices of boas, I understand a lot of people new to the hobby were probably experiencing sticker shock with the prices lately. And in fact, I don't think I would have gotten into the hobby in the way I did, 15, 20 years ago, if prices had been that high. It's unfortunate. You might say, well, it's great for breeders. They can get top dollar for their animals. But, ultimately, if the prices continue to go up so high that beginners can't get into the hobby and that it's more of an elitist type of hobby, that's really not a good thing, because we need more and more people to get into the hobby to continue, keeping these animals and breeding them. One thing you might think to yourself, though, is if you see, say, someone selling a litter of boas for $1,000 a piece. $1,000 for a typical boa price, 15 or 20 years ago, that would have seemed absolutely insane. But now there's more and more boas that's just about the average price for them. And I don't know if the price is going to go down eventually. Probably not, just because of inflation and all the increased prices that are here to stay for pretty much everything. But you might see these really, high prices, and you might say, well, the person's making a lot of money. Is this price gouging? Do they really need to charge this much? And so what it comes down to is, if someone is selling a litter of, say, 15 baby boas for $1,000 a piece, it seems like a lot of money, but when you look at their entire collection, the number of boas that actually contribute to that litter is probably a small fraction of it. So let's say, for example, someone has a collection of 50 boas. it's a good likelihood that maybe only about half of them have reached breeding age. The rest are holdbacks or animals they acquired to grow up. So let's say they have 25 potential breeding animals. So let's say in any given year they're able to pair up half of those animals because they want to give their animals a break between breeding seasons, which you really need to do for boas. So they might have a total of 25 breeders, and from that they might pair up, let's say, a dozen pairs. So of those dozen pairs, of course, they're going to be extremely lucky if they get a 100% success rate. It's more likely that they'll get something between 50 and maybe 60-70%. So let's say of those dozen pairs, let's say they get 7 litters. That would be a pretty good year. They still have to care for all of the boas that aren't reproducing in any given year. And then they might have a really bad year where they just get a handful of animals. The bills still keep coming. So in order for someone to have a successful boa breeding operation, they're going to have to take in at least enough money to break even and to cover the overhead costs, the electricity, the substrate, the rodents, the things that they go through a lot. And that doesn't even count labor. So if you're just doing this for a hobby, the labor is going to come from you. Most likely you're not going to hire people to come and work in your facility. But it's a lot of time, invested, and sometimes you might think, well, maybe my time would be more useful spent elsewhere. But just things that you need to consider when you get this impression that boa breeders are making huge amounts of money from selling their offspring. Now on to the strategies that one uses to price their boas. And so the first strategy I call market price plus tweaks. So this is probably the most reasonable way to determine pricing of a boa. Basically, you just have to figure out the current market price for a similar animal, and then you tweak it a little bit up or down depending on a number of different factors. Not unlike an ounce of gold or a barrel of oil, on any given day there's a theoretical market price for which a given boa would sell for. And it goes up and down over time. So unlike the aforementioned commodities, you can't just go look up the spot price of gold. For example, there's no spot price for a Kralki boa. You have to go to the classified ads where boas sell, and other places where boas sell, things like shows and pet stores, things like that, in order to formulate what is the theoretical price of the boa at that given instant. And so usually what I do is I go to the reptile online classifieds, fauna classifieds, kingsnake.com, morph market, and I just basically scan them just to see what boas are selling for. And I do this pretty much all the time. I haven't bought a boa in this way in several years, and I probably won't at this point in my reptile breeding career. But it's always very valuable to understand what the market price is at any given instant. And so with some of the more common boas, things like a pet store common red-tailed boa, or even some of the more commonly available red-tailed boas, usually you can see enough animals for sale at any given time that you have a pretty good idea of what the market price is. For some of the rarer boas, some certain locality boas, there's maybe only a few available each year. You're going to have to get a little more creative and look at what they've sold for in the past and then kind of figure out how the market's going. But so what I do is I look at the market price and then I basically adjust it based on a number of factors. And so if I have a really big litter with lots of animals and I really want to get them into new homes, I'm probably going to price it a little bit less than the market price. Just because of that. Conversely, if I have a smaller litter and I really like some of the animals and I'm thinking of holding them back for myself, I'm probably going to price it a little bit higher than the market price. And I'm talking about maybe, 25% in either way. So it's not a huge difference from the market price, but it's right there around the market price. I'm also going to take into account the quality. If my animals are greater quality than what I see selling, the price is going to be bumped up a little bit. Also, if I have an animal that I've held on to a little bit longer than I normally would have, say I've been raising it up for 8 months to a year and it's put on some size, I might add a little bit more to the price just because I've had to put more resources in terms of food and care into that particular animal. And so I would say for probably 80% of my animals, I pretty much price them straight with the market. You know, the 20% that maybe I price a little bit differently, usually because these are animals I don't really think I want to sell. You know, and part of my brain tells me, yeah, you probably should be selling these animals, but then part of me, my emotional side, is really attached to them. You know, so I don't really want to sell them. And they might sell for a little bit more, you know, or it's sometimes quite a bit more than the current market price. Okay, so that's the first strategy. The second strategy is when you undercut the market price. And there are a number of reasons why people would do this. Some of them make sense, some of them are probably not such a good idea, but basically you're going to sell for considerably less than the market price, even though your animals are just as nice. You're not down pricing them because of, you know, lower quality. You're basically down pricing them because you want to sell them faster. So one strategy where this might make sense is if you're selling at a show and the show is ending and you have a whole bunch of an animal, like let's say a common, you know, pet store type boa, and you don't want to bring them back and you really want to unload them because your snake room is already cramped and there's other animals you want to hold back. So in that case, you might sell for, you know, lower than the market price. And so in the past, I've heard about people on the last day of a show, you know, let's say it ends on a Sunday, you know, it's going to end at 5 o'clock and it's now, you know, 3:45 and someone's getting a little bit desperate. They might mark the price down pretty drastically. I've even heard about, you know, pet store type boas selling for as little as $25. And that was, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, so probably would be more now. But the point is they sell the animals at considerably below their usual asking price in order to move them out. Another reason why someone might use this strategy is if they're new to the boa breeding hobby. They don't have the reputation yet, and, you know, nobody knows them, so, you know, people who buy from them might feel like they're taking kind of a risk. So they might sell their animals at, you know, considerably less than the going market rate. This undercutting pricing strategy is usually done with more commonly encountered boas like your typical common pet store boa, and less often with rarer boas like this Peruvian red tail. And so this is because, of course, there's fewer supplies of the rare boas, so there's less need to undercut prices because the supply is so low and the demand is so high. And it also has to do with the fact of something called flipping. And so this is one of the main reasons why I would not price using this strategy. And that's because if you have something and you sell at below the market value, it opens up a window that people can buy that item and then turn around and raise the price for a quick profit. And as much as I'd like to think this doesn't happen with, you know, a living thing like a boa, unfortunately it does. And it's really a bad thing both for the boas and for the people involved in the hobby. So let's say someone has a rare, you know, type of boa with the current market value of, let's say, $2,000, but they want to sell it quickly, so they price the whole litter at $1,000 a piece. You know, someone else comes along, sees the opportunity, buys, you know, let's say 5 of them out of the litter, and then turns around and instantly sells them for double the price, $2,000 a piece. Pricing your boas at well below the market value, unfortunately, just opens up the window for people to do this kind of thing. And I haven't really had any huge, this happened to me, you know, in a huge way in the past. I've seen some of my boas have sold. You know, sometimes people have, you know, things come up in their life, you know, so it's understandable that boas do sell, they do exchange hands. You know, times I was a little bit disturbed that somebody bought a boa and then ended up selling it, you know, so soon, sometimes just a month or two after they bought it from me. I do see a lot of what goes on, you know, social media as far as people exchanging boas, and I do recognize sometimes when my boas go to new homes, and I do get contacted by the new owners, and you know, I'm more than happy to give the new owners as much information as I would have given to anybody, you know, because I want my boas to do well wherever they end up, you know, in their new homes. But ultimately, the best thing for a boa is to be in a stable home and not to be constantly bought and sold and traded like a baseball card. So unfortunately, when you do underprice your boas like this, it just opens up the possibility that someone is going to flip them, especially if you're dealing with something that's rare and that's not too common in the marketplace. Okay, so now onto the third strategy. which is kind of the opposite of people that try to undercut, and that's the person who tries to shoot for the moon. So this is when somebody comes up with a pretty much completely unrealistic price of a boa based on their own emotional attachment to it, and they throw it out there, and they probably don't really have any serious interest in selling or serious notion that they're actually going to get the price that they set, but they decide to just try it and see what happens. And so this is usually for people that have relatively rare animals you might see only a handful of times a year. And so, but they take a price and they might put a price on their animal that's 5 to 10 times what the current market price is. And with a rare animal like this, it's kind of hard to really tell what the market price is, because even if the animal sold for a price 2 years ago, you know, the boa market's been evolving so quickly lately, that price is by now is completely obsolete. So they might look back at the price, you know, 2 years ago, and they might times that by 10, throw it out there, you know, and say this is what it's selling for. Often when you read the ad, it's pretty clear they have a pretty serious emotional attachment to the animal and they don't really want to sell it, but they figure, well, I'm going to throw a price out there that's so insane, how could I say no if somebody comes up with that kind of money? And so I don't do this. I might have animals that I'm kind of thinking about holding back, and I might price them a little bit higher, but I'm kind of realistic. If I really like something, I'm not going to sell it. And I'm not going to put a price tag on something that's just so outrageous that there's no way that it's going to sell for this. I think it's just a waste of everyone's time. And I've seen that when people use this strategy on social media, there's often a backlash. They might get negative comments, you know, how can you price gouge? You know, how are you trying to rip people off? But I want to remember that this person isn't selling food or medical care or shelter, you know, a basic need for survival. This person is selling a luxury. Boas are a luxury, okay? Nobody needs to keep boas. It's a luxury item. So if somebody wants to place a price on a boa, that's their prerogative. You, of course, have no obligation to buy a boa at that price or buy a boa at all. That's just how it is in a luxury market. I mean, why the hell would a Picasso painting sell for $100 million when it's just paint on a, you know, canvas? It's the same kind of thing. No one has any obligation to buy these things, but people can try to sell them for whatever they deem the value is. And when you're talking about a rare item like a rare boa that only is available, you know, a handful of times a year, if at all, somebody can pretty much shoot for the moon and put any price they want on it. It's just up to you to pay that or to not pay it. But I do need to point out that for boas or any other luxury item, what seems like an insane price one year looks like a bargain 5 or 10 years down the line. And so who knows, you know, like I said, I would never have believed that the prices boas are selling for today would have been possible, you know, 10, 15 years earlier. But, you know, that's just the reality of the boa market now. So who knows where it's going to go from here, whether it's going to continue to go up, you know, stabilize somewhat, or, you know, something negative might happen causing the whole market to crash. We'll just have to see. So now I just wanted to end the video with an answer to a question I get a lot, and that is when somebody asks me at this point in the breeding season, what are your Suriname red tails going to sell for, or your Bolivian boas, or your crawl key boas, or whatever boa I'm trying to produce. And so this early in the breeding season, I really don't think about the prices. I might have kind of a rough idea, but until I have babies born, I just don't even think about it because I don't want to get my hopes up. And I figure if I overplan like that, I might jinx myself. So I don't plan on thinking about the prices until the babies are actually born. That's not going to be until probably May at the earliest, going through the summer and into the early fall. And so I'll have a better idea, you know, once babies are born, what I have available, and then what I'm going to price them at. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I basically just look at the current market price for that type of boa and then tweak it a little bit, but it's usually within about 20-25% of the current market price. So if you're thinking about buying one of my boas later this year, hopefully I will have that litter, you may want to go on to the online classifieds, do a search for that particular boa, see what they're selling for now, if anyone's selling them, and then look at the past, look at the price trends, look at how much they've increased each year over the last 5 years. That'll probably give you a pretty good idea about the ballpark about what I'm going to be charging. So anyway, I hope to have those boas that you want, but you know, it's just a little too early for me to be thinking about the prices. So I hope this video was helpful. As always, shoot me any questions or comments you might have. Thanks for watching and enjoy your boas.